There's a question that haunts almost everyone who has loved and lost. Why does the pain of a breakup last for years, sometimes even decades, long after the other person is gone? Why do certain wounds refuse to heal, even when life seems to move on and you tell yourself that you should be over it by now? For some, the end of a relationship is a brief storm, intense, painful, but eventually passing. For others, the pain lingers like a shadow, returning in waves, hidden in everyday moments, resurfacing on quiet nights or in the places where memories still echo. Time moves forward, but a part of you remains trapped in the moment when everything changed, and the world rarely understands. You just have to move on, they say. Time heals all wounds. But you know the truth. Time does not always heal, and moving on is not just an act of willpower. Carl Jung understood something that most people overlook. The heart does not operate on logic, and the soul does not follow a calendar. When we love, we don't just form memories, we create invisible threads deep within the psyche that bind us to another person. Jung called these threads archetypal bonds. They're not just habits or routines. They're connections that reach into the deepest layers of our unconscious. To lose such a bond is to lose a part of yourself. And that is why some heartbreak feels less like an event and more like an existential fracture. The pain lingers not because you are weak, but because what was torn away was never just a habit or a comfort. It was a piece of your inner world. Breakup pain becomes more than sadness. It becomes a trauma of identity. You don't just mourn the person. You mourn the future you imagined, the version of yourself that existed only in that relationship, the sense of home that you lost when they left. Jung would say that a breakup can activate the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains all the pain, fear, and unmet needs we carry inside. Suddenly, the end of a relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting all your hidden wounds and unresolved stories. The pain is not just about the other person. It is about the parts of yourself that you lost, denied, or sacrificed for love. And here lies the paradox. The deeper you loved, the deeper the wound. The more your identity merged with another, the more profound the rupture when they're gone. You find yourself haunted by questions that have no answers. Was it my fault? Could I have done something different? Was any of it real? Why do I still feel their presence when they're gone? Jung taught that such haunting is not a flaw in your character. It is the psyche's way of forcing you to confront what you have ignored. The soul does not forget what the mind tries to bury. The pain of a breakup is so enduring because it is a crisis of meaning. Love gives life structure, purpose, and direction. When it is lost, all the meanings collapse. Jung wrote that meaninglessness inhibits fullness of life and is therefore equivalent to illness. In the aftermath of heartbreak, you may feel not only empty, but sick, as if the world has lost its color and nothing feels real or urgent anymore. The loss is not just emotional. It is existential. You are forced to ask, who am I now without this person? Where does my story go from here? Most people try to answer these questions with distraction or denial. They seek new relationships, new routines, or bury themselves in work, hoping to numb the ache. But the pain remains, quietly shaping your choices and thoughts. Jung would say that the only way out is through. You cannot rush grief, and you cannot reason your way past a wound that is deeper than words. The wound must be honored. The grief must be felt, not fixed. This is not weakness. It is the only path to transformation. A breakup, when deeply felt, is an initiation, a forced encounter with your own depths, an unmasking of all you believed about love, safety, and self. The pain lasts for years because you're not just mourning a person, You are being asked to reconstruct your inner world from the rubble. And so, the question is not, how do I make the pain stop, but what is the pain showing me about myself? What parts of you did you abandon in order to be loved? What did you lose that you are still searching for in everyone you meet? The answers to these questions are rarely simple, but they are the keys to healing. Jung believed that every wound conceals a secret, a hidden lesson or gift that can only be discovered when we stop running from our pain and start listening to it. Heartbreak, in this sense, is not just an ending. It is an invitation to finally meet yourself. That is where we begin. If you've ever wondered why breakup pain can last so long, even after life has pushed you forward, you're not alone and you're not broken. It's because, as Jung pointed out, the psyche works in layers, and heartbreak is not a surface wound. When you lose someone you love, it isn't just a story that ends. It's a collapse in the foundation of your inner world. We talk a lot about moving on, but rarely do we understand what that truly demands. Moving on is not simply leaving memories behind. It's a confrontation with the self that emerges in the ruins. The pain lingers because what was lost was woven into the fabric of your being. Modern culture tends to trivialize heartbreak, encouraging quick fixes and distractions. Get out there and meet someone new, or just focus on yourself, people say. But this advice, well-intentioned as it is, often fails to touch the true nature of heartbreak. The truth is, you cannot replace one soul with another, no matter how hard you try. You can't fill a soul wound with a new distraction, a rebound, or even with personal achievement. Jung warned against using distraction to cover up deeper wounds, because anything you refuse to face will simply return, often disguised as something else. A relationship lost can echo through years of your life, manifesting as loneliness, anxiety, or even repeated patterns with new partners. So why does the pain return, sometimes years after the breakup? Because unresolved heartbreak is a wound that reopens every time a new experience touches the same place. A certain song, a smell, a glance in a crowded room, and suddenly you're transported back in time, feeling the ache as raw as the day it began. Jung described this as a psychic imprint, a scar on the unconscious, a complex that shapes your feelings and reactions long after you think you've healed. Your mind may move on, but your soul keeps the score. Heart wounds do not obey the clock. You might wonder, if time does not heal all wounds, what does? The answer is uncomfortable, but vital. Healing comes not from avoidance, but from attention. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The pain that lingers after a breakup is a message from the unconscious. It tells you what remains unresolved, what needs to be grieved, and what was never integrated into your story. For some, it means grieving not only the person, but the dreams, hopes, and parts of themselves that were tied to that love. Many people find themselves haunted by what-if questions. What if I had done something differently? What if I was more lovable or less flawed? This endless self-inquiry is part of the heartbreak complex, a psychological loop that keeps the pain alive. Jung believed that suffering, when fully acknowledged, can lead to transformation, but only if you stop looking for someone or something outside yourself to complete the healing. Instead, you must become the witness to your own pain. There is a deeper reason heartbreak can feel so endless. When you love deeply, you don't just give your heart. You give your story, your dreams, and sometimes even your identity. The end of a relationship can feel like the death of a self you spent years building. Who are you when you're not someone's partner? What remains when the roles, the routines, and the future you imagine disappear? These are existential questions, and they cut deeper than any advice or positive affirmation. The most enduring heartbreaks are those where something fundamental in you was awakened, only to be left unfinished. Perhaps you met someone who saw parts of you that no one else ever noticed. Perhaps that love brought you alive, made you see the world in color for the first time, or helped you believe in yourself. And when it was gone, the world seemed gray, the magic vanished, and you felt smaller, not just lonelier. Jung wrote that such experiences are initiations. They break you down so that something deeper might break through, but only if you allow yourself to feel and reflect rather than close off and numb out. Sometimes heartbreak lingers because it is tied to old wounds from childhood or earlier relationships that were never healed. The end of love can reawaken feelings of abandonment, rejection, or unworthiness that have been buried for years. This is the shadow rising, the pain that lives beneath the pain, demanding attention. Until you face these deeper wounds, each breakup is not just about the person you lost, but about every loss you've ever suffered. That's why it feels so heavy, so endless, so all-consuming. And here is the truth Jung would want you to hear. You are not meant to erase the pain, but to listen to it. The pain is a teacher, albeit a harsh one. It shows you where you are still incomplete, where your love for yourself must grow, where your old beliefs about worthiness and connection must be transformed. Heartbreak is not a sign of weakness, but of depth, a sign that you have the capacity to care, to risk, to dream. But to heal, you must become conscious of what the pain is really asking from you. Healing heartbreak, then, is not about getting over it. It's about becoming whole. It's about integrating the loss, not erasing the memory. It's about finding meaning, even in suffering, and allowing yourself to grow from the ashes of what was lost. This is not a process you can rush. It is a journey through your own depths, and it is different for everyone. So when you wonder why the pain lasts for years, remember, it lingers because your soul is not ready to let go of what mattered. And maybe, in honoring that, you will discover a new kind of strength, the courage to face yourself, to rebuild from nothing, and to trust that your heart, though wounded, still beats with the power to love again. One of the cruelest tricks of heartbreak is the illusion that time alone will dissolve your pain, that the years will gently erase the ache. Yet, as so many discover, the grief can feel as sharp on the 1000th day as on the first. Why? Because what was lost wasn't just a person, but the architecture of meaning you built around them. Jung understood that when we love, we invest the best parts of ourselves in another. The relationship becomes a stage where your deepest hopes, fears, dreams, and wounds are played out. When the story ends, it's not only the character that exits your life, it's the entire world you built together that comes crashing down. This is why memories become so tormenting. You can change your routine, block their number, even move to a new city, but the past persists in the psyche. Every meaningful relationship forms a kind of inner myth, an emotional narrative that's stitched into your sense of self. When it's over, you lose not only the other, but also the myth you lived inside. That loss is hard to describe. A sense of emptiness, a void, as if life has gone out of tune. It's more than nostalgia. It's an existential ache for a story that can never be continued. For many, the pain lingers because of unfinished business. Questions left unanswered, words unsaid, closure denied. Our culture idolizes the idea of closure, but Jung would say that the psyche rarely works so cleanly. The unconscious often demands not answers, but acknowledgement. That is why dreams about your lost love or moments of involuntary longing continue to visit you even years later. The soul is not interested in tidy endings. It wants you to confront the rawness, the truth, the parts of yourself that remain unsettled. This process is complicated by the way heartbreak often activates the shadow, all those aspects of yourself you'd rather not see. Maybe you discover jealousy, insecurity, or shame lurking behind your grief. Perhaps you're confronted with a lifelong fear of abandonment, or the realization that you made yourself small in order to keep someone's love. Jung believed that the pain of heartbreak is often a call to confront the shadow. It is less about the other person and more about what the loss reveals within you. In the wake of loss, you may try to rush the journey to force yourself into healing. You chase distractions, pile up new experiences, try to live your best life as if pain can be outperformed. But the psyche doesn't heal on command. True healing comes not from denial, but from acceptance. To integrate a heartbreak is to face every emotion, rage, longing, regret, even the parts of you that wish you'd never met that person at all. This honesty is brutal, but it is the only path to liberation. Jung insisted that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Heartbreak is darkness, but within it lies the seed of awakening. Perhaps the most insidious wound left by heartbreak is the loss of trust in others, in love, even in yourself. After deep pain, many people erect emotional walls, afraid to risk vulnerability again. Some become bitter, interpreting every new connection through the lens of past betrayal. Others become compulsive seekers, looking for someone new to fill the emptiness left behind. But no one can save you from your own pain. The work of healing must be done alone, in the silent places of the soul. This is the paradox Jung described. Heartbreak isolates, but also invites self-discovery. In the void, you are forced to meet yourself without distractions. You come face to face with your unmet needs, your patterns of self-abandonment, the illusions you carried about love and worthiness. You may even realize that the pain you feel now is older than the relationship itself, that it echoes wounds from childhood or even ancestral trauma. The person who left was a trigger, not the source. This realization is both liberating and terrifying. It means that your healing is in your hands. Yet there is hope. As the months and years pass, something inside you begins to shift. If you resist the urge to numb out, if you let yourself feel, slowly the pain softens into wisdom. You start to see the old story with new eyes. The loss, while still real, becomes a teacher. You discover a resilience you didn't know you had. You recognize patterns that once ruled you unconsciously. You may even feel gratitude for the person who hurt you, not because you should, but because you see how they awakened parts of you that needed to be seen. But this wisdom is earned, not given. There are no shortcuts. The only way out is through. Jung wrote that only the wounded physician heals. In other words, your own pain, once acknowledged and integrated, becomes the source of your strength and empathy for others. You can't change the past, but you can change your relationship to it. And that is where true freedom lies, not in forgetting, but in transforming the wound into meaning. So if your heartbreak still lingers after years, know this: you are not broken and you are not alone. You are walking a path that millions have walked before you, a path of darkness, yes, but also of awakening. The wound is not the end of your story. It is the place where a new story begins, if you are willing to listen. There comes a moment in every heartbreak where the grief transforms from sharp agony to a kind of background ache, still present, but quieter, like an old scar beneath the skin. Yet even as the pain becomes less acute, it doesn't simply vanish. It seeps into your daily life, coloring the way you see yourself, others, and the world. Sometimes, It feels as though the wound has become a part of your identity, a silent companion you carry everywhere. You might start to wonder, will I ever truly heal? Or is this just who I am now? Jung would urge you to look closer at what remains. When a relationship ends, it doesn't just take away the other person, it leaves you with yourself. This is perhaps the most frightening and most liberating part of heartbreak. It strips away all illusions, all distractions, and leaves you face to face with the parts of your soul you neglected or ignored for years. The quiet after loss is not just emptiness, it is space. Space for self-reflection, for new questions, and for an honesty that might have been impossible when you were still wrapped in the comfort of love. Many find themselves haunted by a sense of unfinished business. Words left unsaid, apologies never spoken, promises that will never be kept. These fragments can become heavy, looping endlessly in the mind, fueling regret and self-doubt. It's tempting to chase closure, to search for a final conversation or explanation that will finally put your heart at rest. But as Jung understood, closure is rarely about what the other person gives you. It's about what you can give yourself. Real closure is internal. It's the acceptance that some chapters end mid-sentence, and some stories will never have a satisfying conclusion. The lesson is not in perfect endings, but in the ability to carry on despite them. The lingering pain after a breakup is often amplified by isolation. Friends and family may tire of your grief, urging you to move on or find someone new. But healing is not a group activity. It is a solitary journey. There are moments when only you can sit with your pain, when only you can face the memories that still sting. Jung described this as an initiation, the descent into your own darkness. The pain strips away your roles and defenses, forcing you to question everything you thought you knew about love, worth, and belonging. As you sit with your grief, you may notice something unexpected. New aspects of yourself begin to emerge. Freed from the demands of the relationship, you rediscover forgotten passions, neglected friendships, or parts of your personality that were muted to maintain harmony. Pain, in this way, becomes a catalyst for rebirth. The loss that once felt like the end of your story can become the beginning of a new chapter, one written with greater self-awareness and integrity. Yet, for many, the journey is complicated by a longing for what might have been. The mind replays old memories, searching for signs, trying to make sense of the past. You might find yourself idealizing the relationship, remembering only the good times, or blaming yourself for its collapse. This nostalgia is natural, but can become a trap. Jung believed that true healing means seeing both the light and the shadow of what was lost, acknowledging the flaws as well as the gifts, the lessons as well as the love. Only then can you honor the reality of the connection rather than clinging to an illusion. It's common, after heartbreak, to fear loving again. The pain has taught you caution, and the risk of opening your heart feels almost unbearable. Some choose to armor themselves, to become self-sufficient to the point of isolation, believing it's safer never to feel so deeply again. But Jung warned that to close oneself off from love is to close oneself off from life. True healing is not the absence of risk, but the courage to remain open despite the pain. You may never love in the same way again, but perhaps that's the point. The goal is not to return to who you were before, but to become someone new, someone deeper and more whole. Gradually, as you integrate the lessons of loss, your relationship to the wound changes. The pain that once defined you becomes a source of strength. You recognize your capacity to survive, to endure, to transform suffering into wisdom. You begin to see how the end of one story can make space for another. And when the time is right, you may find yourself willing to risk again. Not because you have forgotten the pain, but because you have learned to trust your own resilience. Jung wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Even heartbreak, in all its cruelty, is an agent of change. You cannot go back to who you were before. You can only move forward, shaped but not destroyed by what you have lost. The wound, carried with honesty and acceptance, becomes a badge of survival, a reminder that you are capable of loving deeply and of healing, even when it seemed impossible. In the end, the pain that lasts for years is not a punishment. It is an invitation to deeper self-knowledge, to greater compassion, and to the possibility of a new kind of love, one rooted not in fear or need, but in the hard-won wisdom of your own heart. As you walk the long, uncertain road of heartbreak, there comes a quiet reckoning, a point where pain, memory, and hope begin to intertwine. At first, every day might feel like another lap through the same cycle, remembering, regretting, aching, yearning. But with time and honest reflection, the nature of your suffering subtly shifts. You realize you're no longer just mourning the person or the loss itself. You're mourning the parts of yourself that you gave away, the illusions you clung to, and the story you thought you were living. This is the heart of Jung's teaching. Real healing begins not when the pain stops, but when you start to see the meaning beneath the wound. You may notice that your inner landscape is different now, quieter but also richer. The silence that once felt like emptiness begins to feel like clarity. The world, which seemed faded and distant after your loss, gradually returns in color. You become more attentive to small joys, sunlight through a window, the taste of your favorite food, the comfort of an honest conversation. Where once everything was measured against what you had lost, now you start to measure things against who you are becoming. The person you were is gone. The person you are, wiser, more discerning, more compassionate, takes their place. The most profound lesson of heartbreak is this: the pain endures only as long as you resist the growth it demands. Every time you try to numb it, rush it, or run from it, the wound deepens. But when you finally turn toward it, when you dare to ask, "What am I being called to learn?" the wound begins to transform. Jung believed that all true transformation comes through suffering. Not because suffering is inherently noble, but because it strips away what is false and leaves only what is real. Sometimes, as you process your loss, you may find yourself circling back to gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for what it revealed. You see now how the relationship mirrored your deepest needs and fears, your unhealed childhood wounds, your hidden strengths. You see how love, even when lost, was an invitation to greater wholeness. This is not a lesson you learn once, but a wisdom that unfolds slowly in layers. You may still have days of longing, of questioning, of wishing things could have been different. That's human, but these days no longer define you. They become reminders of your capacity to love, to grieve, and to grow. Some people will not understand your journey. They will urge you to move on, unable to comprehend why the pain persists. But their advice, though well-intentioned, belongs to a world that fears vulnerability and worships quick fixes. You, on the other hand, have walked through the fire. You have discovered that the only way to truly move on is to move inward, into the depths of your own psyche, into the places where love and loss have left their mark. Here, in this hidden territory, you become your own healer. As you continue, you may notice a new openness within you, a readiness to risk again, to trust, to hope. But now you do so with eyes wide open. You know that love is never guaranteed, that every connection carries the risk of loss. Yet, this does not make you cynical. It makes you courageous. You understand that to love is not to possess, but to witness, to be fully present, even knowing that everything is temporary. This acceptance brings peace, a peace born not from avoidance, but from deep engagement with life as it is. Jung would remind you, the most meaningful relationships are those that change you, not just those that comfort you. The love that broke your heart was real, not because it lasted, but because it awakened you to yourself. Its ending was not the universe's punishment, but its invitation to become someone who loves from fullness, not from lack, from truth, not from illusion. If you are still carrying heartbreak after years, know this. You are living proof of the soul's depth, its courage, and its longing for wholeness. Your pain is not your enemy. It is your guide. It reminds you that you are alive, that you care, that you refuse to settle for a numb, half-lived existence. The wound may never disappear completely, but it will become part of your story, not the whole of it. And one day, perhaps sooner than you think, you will find yourself able to look back at the one who left, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. You will realize that your love was never wasted, your pain was never pointless, and your story is still unfolding. The scars will remain, but so will the strength they gave you. You are not the person who was left behind. You're the one who kept going. And that is how the pain finally becomes meaning. Because as Jung understood, every heartbreak contains within it the seed of transformation. A seed that, when nurtured with honesty and courage, can grow into a life more authentic, more compassionate, and more free than anything you knew before. This is not forgetting. This is not moving on. This is moving deeper into your own heart, into your own truth, into the vast and mysterious landscape of the soul. This is how finally you heal,